Now, it's true many banks and hedge funds have operations in international finance centres. They provide a cost-effective, tax-neutral administration platform in a well-regulated environment. Blaming them for what has happened in the US and the UK is something of a nonsense. It has no credible connection. Jersey competes for business on exactly the same basis as the 70 other countries in the world who offer some kind of benign, tax-neutral regime to the overseas investor. That is, on a mix of business expertise, political and social stability, modern infrastructure, good communications and sound regulation. Without international capital attracted on exactly the same basis, the US and the UK and many other deficit nations could not hope to fund their significant budget deficits. Numerous studies have been undertaken by internationally respected academics, including Professors Hines, Desai, Foley, Hijazi, and many others, and evidence beyond question that IFCs are efficient allocators of capital. IFCs act as way stations. They gather capital from around the world where it's not needed, and then conduit that capital to where it can be most effectively deployed. Tax is paid on the capital before it arrives in the way station, and it will be paid when it leaves the way station as it's invested and put to work. This allows large proximate onshore economies to operate their domestic tax systems as they need without dislocation from the need to offer attractive tax treatment in their primary tax framework for foreign investment. This has been proven in numerous studies to increase economic activity, increase jobs, increase wealth creation, such that a boost to tax take is generated. However, given that most Western governments were already under immense pressure from a burgeoning public sector and faced with huge additional borrowing due to the financial crisis, the location of a blame candidate could look like a pretty attractive opportunity if you're a politician on the ropes. Is this just sour grapes from one of those international finance centres? Well, not according to some of the world's leading academics in the field of economics, law, and international relations, and I'm quoting, "As anyone who has read the FT's coverage of the financial crisis would know, its roots lie not in the Grand Cayman or in the Isle of Man, but in New York and London. If there's been any brutal exposure, it is of the inadequacies of the US and European Union oversight of their financial systems. Our research into offshore financial centres has consistently shown that they have better legal tools and tougher standards than do most onshore jurisdictions." Craig Boyes, Associate Professor of Law, Case Western University, and Andrew P. Morris, Professor of Law and Business, University of Illinois. Erwin Stelzer commented recently in the Daily Telegraph on the G20 approach to competition and the role of international finance centres. And I quote again, "Legal competition by governments to attract businesses by offering the most attractive mix of low taxes and quality public services is as effective in making governments efficient as competition among retailers or producers of a host of household goods is in forcing private firms to be efficient." The G20 debate has focused on transparency and information, but the debate is not just about transparency and disclosure. The real issue underpinning this whole debate is not in fact transparency, but tax. Who collects it and how? It's also about wealth, who creates it, who enjoys it, who controls it, and who shares in it. The arguments actually are as old as time, but have lost none of their potency in exposing societal fault lines. Most developed democracies would see the maintenance of a balanced system of wealth distribution as fair and reasonable, with those who prosper enjoying the fruits of their wealth, whilst providing for shared services and a safety net for the needy. I believe the crisis has weakened the commitment of the current UK and US administrations to economic freedoms, to free markets, to responsible capitalism, and to tax competition. Dirigiste is on the march, with the large centrally directed economies of the EU exerting their influence. Measures such as the Alternative Investment Fund Manager Directive and enlargement of the EUSD are both in part designed to impose EU standards on third countries. However, it is self-evident, certainly to me, that free markets, globalisation and tax competition have all combined to produce stellar growth in world GDP over the last 30 years, pulling countless millions out of poverty. Sadly, problems caused by the tooth and claw capitalism of a few financial masters of the universe over the last few years may be about to undo much of this good work. Unfettered capitalism can be problematical, and checks and balances by way of sound regulation are clearly essential. However, it's important to keep in view that in remedying the global financial crisis, it is the checks and balances which need attention, and that we do not throw the wealth-creating baby out with the bathwater. Moves are in train to stigmatise wealth structuring and planning, to restrict capital movement through a tax on the use of international finance centres, and to undermine transfer pricing arrangements. If successful, I believe the combined effects of these protectionist measures will be to trap capital within borders, significantly reducing overall economic activity. Such measures are likely to restrict wealth-creating activity and encourage growth in central government expenditure. The net effect will be a constriction of wealth, a reduction in tax bases, and a loss of global prosperity driven by a short-sighted grab for tax. Significantly, the OECD believes this kind of protectionism in respect of tax competition will be a bad thing. I'm quoting again. We also agree on the need to avoid raising new tax obstacles to cross-border trade and investment. Indeed, it has been asserted that if the project can be successfully concluded, governments will be subject to legitimate market constraints and that fair tax competition may produce a strong downward pressure on tax rates. The reality is this particular tax grab will miss the target, as even if discriminatory measures are introduced against international finance centres, they will not see universal adoption. Like water, the flow will move the course of least resistance, with mobile capital moving eastwards to Hong Kong, Singapore, and China, as the US and Europe live with the outcomes of the unintended consequences of financial services protectionism. Utilising your tax-free savings allowances, paying into a pension, or trading a few shares within your capital gains tax allowance are all activities that many millions of people in the United Kingdom undertake and enjoy. They are tax avoidance, which means to say that without taking those planning measures, those people would pay more tax. To accuse banks or companies or individuals of illicit or immoral behaviour because they plan their international affairs in perfectly legal and sensible ways simply raises a spectre of wrongdoing in a misleading and a mischievous way. Moral judgment without a transcending benchmark is simply a matter of opinion. An opinion fueled by anger is rarely rational. Paid-for research produced by the tax hobbyists, supported by some NGO groups, and trumpeted by sympathetic bugles, claims that billions is being misappropriated through international finance centres. These claims have no credible evidence underpinning them, demonstrating an opacity which these same sources would find intolerable were it postulated by others. This guesswork is simply a convenient fiction designed to mislead and incite opposition. The recent studies by the University of Oxford Business Taxation Group and the Deloitte study conducted as part of the Foot Review of the British offshore financial centres have exposed these estimates of tax leakage as grossly overstated. Herein lies the fundamental lack of understanding of the benefit the Crown dependencies bring to the United Kingdom. With around $200 billion of international capital conduited into the City of London in the second quarter of 2009 by Jersey alone, it is self-evident that significant benefit is being enjoyed by the UK from this activity, not to speak of the substantial liquidity support to the UK banking system throughout the banking crisis. Contrary to the myths propagated by detractors, Jersey's deposits are gathered from over 200 countries around the world, with the majority held in non-sterling currencies, and it's undeniable that substantial additional value is brought to the United Kingdom by its loyal Crown dependency. I would contend that tax competition is good for all economies. It leaves more capital in the wealth-creating side of the economy, acts as a brake on excessive government spending, and provides for greater investment activity, thus completing a virtuous circle. There is no law of economics, in my view, which says the economic cake is finite. Recent work involving a comprehensive analysis of the body of research undertaken on IFCs over the last 15 years by a leading US economist, Professor James R. Hines, provides compelling evidence of the value centres like Jersey bring to proximate economies. His findings will be published by STEP, the Society of Trustee and Estate Practitioners, tomorrow, and I would commend his paper to you. I'm quoting very briefly from Professor Hines. The evidence indicates that IFCs contribute to financial development and stability in neighbouring countries, encourage investment, employment, and other aspects of business development in high-tax countries, have salutary effects on tax competition, promote good government, and enhance economic growth elsewhere. The evidence appears to be quite robust and suggests a rather different interpretation of the IFC experience than some that appear from more casual readings of history. End of quote. The financial crisis has brought home the essential requirement to keep capital flowing to business, whether it be debt or equity. The slowdown in the real economy has principally been caused by a lack of capital, the vital lubricant for all economic activity. The restoration of capital flows is the essential prerequisite for the recovery that we all hope for. Centres like Jersey form efficient conduits for internationally mobile capital, facilitating more effective and productive economic activity. Not only are we not part of the problem with respect to the global financial crisis, we are an important part of the solution. Thank you for your attention.